Remi, thank you so much for joining us, man. I know you're a busy guy, especially as of just 14 days ago from the time we recorded this. You released The Unexpected.
Yeah.
It's out there. I know you're doing the circuit, getting that thing. So in addition to being an author, filmmaker, writer, producer, actor, when do you sleep?
I don't, when I die.
or is that what Hell Week taught you?
Yeah,
that you don't actually need sleep.
I don't. Yeah. Well, it taught me that I needed sleep, but it taught me that what's more important, I got to deal with that first.
Hey man, it's really, and I'm not blowing smoke you like from one team guy to another. It is cool to have you on because I've been following you on social media for a long time. I'm riding the coattails. We all are. All team guys are a little bit riding the coattails of your success and the success of all the guys who are out there doing good things. But in particular, in that space, getting out there and making not just making a film that Hollywood just eats up, but making a documentary that matters now, which The Unexpected is now what? The Unexpected Redemption? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Unexpected Redemption is going to be the feature film. So it's going to be the full-on 2 hours, 2-hour movie. So Unexpected is just a 32-minute short film, but now we're expanding the universe into a full-on film.
And so for those of our listeners or viewers on YouTube who don't know, actually, I want to tell your story. I'll let you kind of tell us a little about The Unexpected and then Unexpected Redemption.
Yeah, so when I got out of the teams in 2016 and the Navy, I know we say teams before your audience, that's just the Navy. I was, I still felt that need to serve in different ways. Like I didn't know quite what to do. I knew I had to have my day job, but I also felt like, just like any other service member, like this need to continue to serve. And I did different things. I went to prisons, men's prisons, women's prisons. I did a lot of work with inner city at-risk youth. As a matter of fact, I just opened up a charter school in Muskegon, Michigan. We K through 5.
Of course you did. Because with all that free time, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you open a charter school?
I know, right? But I just felt this need to just give back and do different things. And the one reoccurring theme was human trafficking. It was something that just kept on coming my way. I wasn't seeking it. And I didn't know it. I didn't know what human trafficking meant when I got out of the military. I had no clue. And I was contacted by a nonprofit out of Sacramento called Without Permission, because they have a really, really bad human trafficking problem up in Sacramento, which I didn't know. And they asked me to come help out with some of the stuff that they were doing up there. And I did. And about a year later, the founder of In-N-Out Burger, the owner of In-N-Out Burger, Lindsay Snyder, she reached out to me because she was doing a charity bowling event for her human trafficking nonprofit, Slave to Nothing. And again, these were organizations that were reaching out to me. And finally, one year between 2017 and 2018, another nonprofit reached out that employs former SEALs and CAG and other special operations and agency guys to actually, go overseas and rescue kids trapped in sex trafficking and organ harvesting, and arrest Americans who go to these countries to receive services from human trafficking victims. And so as soon as they sent me a video of what was going on and asked if I would be in, I quickly raised my hand and went down to, the Caribbean and was able to kind of get into that stuff, boots on the ground, instead of just, talking about it and, helping raise money. And fast forward, I remember one time going down to DR with this particular organization, which will remain nameless. And we were in this slum in the DR that was really, really, it was a horrible slum. It was one of the worst slums I've been in my life. And in this particular slum we were in, the parents were known for selling their daughters to traffickers. And the traffickers would then take the daughters to the northern part of DR where all the tourists, Americans, other Westerners would come, and they would be raped for money. Obviously, for them, it was prostitution for the traffickers, but it was, at the end of the day, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, that's rape. And I, being a father of 2 sons at the time, I couldn't grasp the concept of selling my child.
Right.
for anything. I'd I'd kill myself and sell myself before I would sell my children.
Right.
And,
I think when we apply like a Western thought process, you forgive me for interrupting. I think it's when we apply that Western thought process, we just go, oh, like they must be bad parents. And I think there's more of a question than it is a statement. What you found in the documentary is like there's a level of desperation that we in America have never sensed.
Exactly.
The level of desperation you must feel to sell your kid so that they don't starve to death or whatever it is. God, man, that's just
That's spot on.
It's a tough topic, right?
100%. You're spot on. That is the key factor for all, at least from what I found, when parents sell their kids, or even victims want to buy these organs, or traffickers, the common denominator is desperation. And to kind of drive that point home even further, when I was in DR in this slum, one of the liaisons pulled me into this chapel that was no bigger than the size of 3 toilet stalls. And at the end of the chapel wall was a dead 6-month-old baby in a casket. And he had explained to me that the baby had died because the mother's breast milk dried up. She wasn't getting enough food and water sustenance, so her breast milk dried up, and she got formula. She was mixing the formula with the local water, and that's ultimately what killed the baby. So he was using that as a teachable moment for me to help me understand the desperation. And because he was saying for them, it's either you sell your daughter so that you can have food and water for the rest of your kids, or all your kids die. So, just again, to drive home your point, it was the parents were desperate. And, when you look around the world in other countries like India and Egypt, especially when I'll back up for a second, when people hear human trafficking, they often and only go to sex trafficking. That's it. They don't understand that human trafficking is a blanket term. There are multiple facets of human trafficking. There's sex trafficking, there's organ harvesting, which my film focuses on. There's labor, there's forced marriage, where women are moved to different places to be and forced to sold as wives to other people. There's drugs, where kids are used as mules. They're used as slaves to move drugs into the US. I interviewed a guy about a month ago who was lured from Venezuela to Mexico with the promise of being smuggled across the border into the US. And when he got to Mexico, he was abducted by the same people who lured him there, and he was put in a house with about 100 other migrants from all across South America. There were even people in that house from other parts of the world. The women were used for sex trafficking, the men were used for labor and other financial means, and the kids were used as mules. They were sent through the pipes, the underground, the pipes that run from Mexico into the US to move drugs into the US, because they're so small, kids are smaller. And so that's another form of trafficking. And another form is, there's so many different forms. There's one I came across earlier this year of a guy who was in Cambodia, he was a Chinese guy from China who was abducted in Cambodia by a gang, and they blood trafficked him. So they strapped him down for months and just kept on drawing his blood for what reason, I don't know. But, again, there are these different facets. And I really wanted to focus in on organ harvesting because that's a facet that's grossly underlooked, but it is a part of human trafficking that is widespread and very lucrative.
Man, there is a level of evil on this earth that I never knew. And I'm a team guy. I'm a SEAL. I've seen and I've fought like levels of depravity and levels of evil. Yeah. This is just a different level, right? Just the willful use of human life is just nothing but a tool. It makes you like have a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting, right?
Yeah, man, it makes your blood boil, and the crazy thing is so many stories just keep coming out, more and more stories, even here in America, and the more stories I hear, the more like, it sucks because it's evil, but you feel the sense of hopelessness. Help, but especially us as team guys, we're trained to go do specific things, and to be in a position where, you want to go crush somebody's skull, for trafficking a child, but you really can't, and that was one of the main reasons why I made this film, was because I wanted to fight in a way where I can engage others in the fight. You know, when we were overseas, we partnered with, I don't know what they call now, but forces called psyops and civil affairs, and they would go into different villages and rebuild schools or hand out soccer balls or provide food or provide some type of care for women and children. And what we were doing through that was winning the hearts and the minds of the locals so that they would be willing to tell us when a bad guy's coming, or not hide a bad guy, or or leave the area if we need everybody to leave so that we could conduct a specific operation. And the only reason why we were able to get them on our side, which helped us win the fight, was by winning the hearts and minds. And that's how I see this film. I see it as one big psyops operation, a way to fight by blasting the message out there the best I can through, because most people are not going to read news articles or do the research on it, but people will watch a 32-minute film. And that was another reason why I think it was smart to make it 32 minutes opposed to 2 hours, because I wanted to do this gradual buildup, and no one has no excuse not to watch a 32-minute film and then get educated on the realities of it, and then hopefully, do something. And that's what the film is. It's one big call to action. It's one big saying, hey, this stuff goes on. And this is not something that goes on far away. This is something that goes on here in the U.S. I mean, in the U.S. alone, it's about a $30 to $35 billion industry. Human trafficking globally is a $150 billion industry. You brought up a point a few seconds ago about child pornography. The biggest producer and consumer of child pornography, which is pornography made with trafficked kids, are Americans. We're the biggest consumers and producers of child pornography. So, it's happening here in America in a large scale. It's so underreported. You'll get a lot of local news stories, but as far as mainstream media really getting into it, you don't get a lot of it.
It's interesting. There's 2 points you bring up there. And the first one is you said early in the conversation here, you said Sacramento is one of the worst in the United States. And when people think of human trafficking, that's like Chechen gangs snatching people in like far off Estonia or something. That's not something that goes on in my backyard, because we live here in America, and that's somebody else's problem. But is that part of the message, or is that part of the discovery as you were doing the film, or is that part of the message that the film drives home, that hey man, like your blinders aren't stopping it from happening. It's happening right outside in our own backyards.
Yeah, I think, as far as like being specific as it relates to like the message being that it happens here, I wouldn't say I got that specific, but I think I did get specific on a piece that Americans are involved. Because at the end of the day, we are the number one consumer, not just of child pornography, but of pornography that is developed with the use of trafficked victims. We are the number one consumer of that type of pornography as well. We're talking adults. A lot of people, you get guys who, they watch pornography and they're like, oh, it's innocent. I'm not bothering anybody. I'm not hurting. I'm not raping anybody. But they don't know that they're supporting what they may be watching may be something that was produced with a trafficked victim. I mean, now you have all of these apps like Pornhub. Pornhub has had issues with kids being on there. Being used for pornography. You have, what's the OnlyFans? I'm not saying all of OnlyFans is like a big, but there are people on OnlyFans where you don't know how they're being controlled or how they're being used or how they're being forced, right? And so I think one of the main messages that I did want to get across is that we are the benefactor, the consumer. We're driving as Americans, we drive the demand for this. Now, there is a place for a film where I can get more specific about how it is happening in our backyard, because the reality is it is happening in our backyard. There's so many stories, but one that comes to mind is a recent story from June of this year. And there were so many more stories after that, but this is probably the most prominent because this was a mainstream story. But there was a girl who went to the Dallas Mavericks playoff game with her father. And again, to be able to afford tickets to a game, you're not poor, right?
You're right.
So she's an, American girl, and she gets up to go use the bathroom, never comes back. Dad goes to look for her, can't find her. Security goes to look for her, can't find her. Cops come, they write it off that she was a runaway because she was a teenager. Dad goes home, talks to the mom. They're distraught, obviously. They're like, this is not our daughter. Something happened to her. They engaged a human trafficking nonprofit that started searching for her. Eventually, they found her on the dark web, and there was a profile of her on the dark web. She was being sold for sex. A sting was set up with the local police, and that house was raided. And she was rescued, thank God. But some of the traffickers that were at the game that night were in this house. And again, this happened at a Dallas Mavericks playoff game, you know, so it's happening here and it's happening every day. There's another story I saw about 2-3 days ago. A girl, she was walking down the street, and it was actual video from a Ring camera. A girl was walking down the street, teenage girl, could have probably 14, 15 years old, and here in LA. And a guy jumped out of a car, put a gun to her side, walked her into a bathroom and raped her. And you know, and there's so many other cases that are coming out often. So it is happening here. Main point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow, but an important message. Going a little bit lighter, unexpected redemption. I mean, you're connected with in the Hollywood scene.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that happens, because I've never written or produced a movie, but if I understand correctly, it ain't easy, right? Especially taking a film and getting somebody to fund it and back it, and so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So after I finished the short film, I got it through post-production in October of last year. And my agent at APA watched and it was like, man, this is an amazing film. He said, you know, if you write the feature version of this film, we can get this picked up, you know, because you've already done a proof of concept. Now, again, it wasn't my idea to make this film as hey, here's my resume, or hey, here's something now I can go make a movie. I made the film to create awareness around human trafficking. But, you know, my agent saw it and he was just like, we could do something bigger. So fast forward to January of this year, I started writing the screenplay, which picks up 5 years after the event of the short film, still keeping it grounded and still, you know, based on true events, which the short film is based on true events. It's based off, actually, without giving away too much, the victims were, as far as backstory, they were from the August 3rd, 2014 genocide that took place. I won't say where or how. People have to watch the film, and then I put a link to an article in the description of the film. But there was a genocide that took place, and the men were massacred, and the girls were taken and sold into slavery, used for slaves. And so the feature version does have a ground in a reality, true events piece to it, but then for the sake of, you know, putting butts in seats, you got to have action, right? Because people will not typically want to sit for drama, especially when the bad guy's winning over and over and over again. So I went and wrote that film, got that done in I want to say April or May of this year. Can't remember one of those 2 months. And then my agent started taking it out, I want to say in June. And we got a producer on board, Alan Siegel and Gerard Butler. They produce 19 action blockbuster films, and we're close to securing the financing we need for this film. It's about a $35 million film. And we got a country that we're going to shoot in that's going to give us a good tax credit, 30% tax credit. So yeah, man, that's kind of where we are. It's a process. You know, we're still working on casting and closing out the rest of our financing. But yeah, man, it's been a journey. It's exciting. You know, there's the days where it's like you're happy because you have some good wins, and then you get knocked back a few notches, and you know, but just, you know, just like being a frogman, you just keep continuing mission, man.
That is a good segue into a part of your story that I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about it. I've listened to a couple interviews, and I started reading Transformed, and so I know just a little bit about that story. But born into Nigerian royalty, father was a very successful businessman, and I'll let you take it from there. But there's a lot of key pieces that I've heard that I think our audience would just rally behind, because it's really an underdog story of being at the top, getting knocked down, rising back up, being knocked down, and just continue to grind, and a little bit of self-discovery in there. So take us, born in Nigeria, wealthy, successful businessman dad. Mom was a New Yorker, right?
Yeah, she was American. She was American. My mom and my dad actually met. They met in the Metropolitan Museum of Natural History. My mom has always been into art and the arts. And my dad, not only was he a businessman, but he was also an art collector. And as a matter of fact, a good number of pieces of his art is still housed in a art gallery in Nigeria called Nike's Gallery. But that's how they met. They met at the Met, Metropolitan Museum of Natural History, got married 5 months later. My brother was born first in 81, and then I was born in 82, and born into riches, and not just from a physical standpoint, but also from the perspective of my dad was a chief in the Yoruba tribe, which, in Western culture, we refer to royalty as king, queen, prince, princess, Dutch. And in African culture, especially West African culture, royalty is referred to as chief and or your last name. So our last name, Adeleke, Ade means crown, the crown, and Leke means is supreme. So, he was a chief, but also he was an Adeleke, and obviously I'm an Adeleke as well. So, he was respected by so many people because of that title, and he earned that title. Whereas in some families, the kids, especially the firstborn sons, are pretty much handed everything.
Yeah.
My dad, he wasn't handed anything. He after he graduated high school, he got a full ride scholarship, and that was just straight from him being a hardcore student, and studied engineering and architecture in London, and got his master's in engineering and architecture. I mean, he was just,
Wow.
all about getting after it, from an academic standpoint, and building, essentially building his future. And so by the time I came along, his future was that future became my present, and my present was very, very, is a very nice life, to say the least. And but to make a long story short, there's a lot of corruption in Nigeria. Yeah. Nigeria is consistently ranked every year as one of the most corrupt nations in the world. And in part, the country's so rich in resources. You have oil in abundance, right? And there's a country that's China's raping Nigeria of their oil, and in part because the politicians are so greedy and so corrupt that they will, sell oil on nickels on a dime so they can put that money in their pocket instead of it going to the people. It's a known thing for politicians to go
on the take, huh?
Yeah, go on politics poor and come out billionaires. Like, not millionaires, billionaires. And here in America, everybody's like, hey, I want to be a rapper, or I want to be a singer, or I want to be an athlete, or whatever. Like all of these prestige, a doctor, a lawyer. In Nigeria is like, I want to be a politician. Like, that's the big thing right now.
Yeah.
It's always been
a corrupt one.
Yeah, because if I become a politician, then I'll become rich, right?
Wow.
And there's a lot of stories that's come out of Nigeria. One recent one with the I forgot the number of girls, like a few hundred girls who were abducted by Boko Haram, enslaved. So most of them still haven't been rescued. And the state that is not too far from where the girls are believed to be, were the governor was given, I'm just going to throw out a random number, I don't know the exact number, like $50 million, or to in resource, $50 million to get weapons and all of this stuff, and equip the military to go find these girls. And about $2 million of those dollars went to that. So you had guys who were fighting with like one magazine, and vehicles breaking down, and it's like, hey, why don't you we didn't get the money. That money didn't come to us. That money went into the governor's pocket, right? And so that's consistently how it works. And back to my dad, that's essentially what happened to him. He invested millions of dollars in this one project of his own money. Most of the money he made in the West. And once that project had been fully developed, the Lagos state government came in and said that he wasn't allowed to have that, even though the federal government, my dad made that purchase, that deal with the federal government.
Wow.
And because of so much of his wealth was wrapped into millions and millions of dollars, he went to go fight them in court and died weeks later. And then, from there was nobody to fight, and we went from rich to poor.
And truly like rich to poor overnight, right?
Overnight, yeah, having absolutely nothing. Yeah.
So your mom, just to kind of bring us out, your mom moves back. You're a kid who's born and raised in Nigeria. Like I heard you say in another interview, like you traveled the world. You weren't like, you weren't Nigerian. You weren't Nigerian rich. You were really rich, on a global scale. You're traveling the world, right? Your dad had gone to school in London. You traveled all over the world, living in very high end or staying in very high end hotels, the whole thing, right?
Pictures right behind my desk of us, black and white pictures. It's not behind this table, but down on this little stand thing of me as a kid in London. My mom with a fur coat on, my dad with a fur coat type thing on, and and then Paris, and then all of these different places. Yeah, we lived a high life, man.
And then truly overnight, or all but overnight, your mom moves back, and now you become a kid who was born and raised in African royalty. Now you're a kid being raised in the Bronx with a single mom, and who's got two boys who are you at this point you're 8 and 9, I think, roughly, right?
5. I was 5. My brother was 5. Yeah. 5.
And now she's got to find a job, and she's trying to raise you back where she grew up, and if I understand correctly, did okay, right? But found yourself into like being lured in, like onto the streets, life of crime, just a little bit that being dangled there, right?
No, my mom, she, when people ask me how I got through a lot of the things I got through later in life, buds, all that stuff, man. They ask, how did I do it? When they ask, how do I do it? I always go back to my mom, because my mom, she was and continues to be like the model of perseverance. Like literally, I mean, if you look up perseverance in a dictionary, you see a picture of my mom. Like, she would get knocked down so many times and just get back up. I remember like right after my dad died, my mom has and still has a cousin she grew up with. She's really close to. He was a very successful lawyer in New York City, so he was well off. And she reached out to him and said, "Hey, can I just borrow a couple $100 until I figure this thing out?" And he said to her, "Let me call you right back." And 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was his wife. And he said to my mom, "How dare you call up my husband and ask him for money? You never call him up. If you want something, you come to me, but I'm not going to give it to you anyway." And she hung up the phone on my mom. So here, my mom already got knocked down by having her husband die. She goes to her own family to say, "Hey, can you help me out?" And then she gets kicked even harder, and with these two boys, and so, but she was able to always push through that. And that's why even sometimes now, like when I have friends who I grew up with and they go through trials, like I'll talk to them, but then like I'll say, "Hey, you need to talk to my mom. I have my mom talk to you." and this is like no BS. This just happened an hour ago. A good friend of mine, Ricardo, who's in my book, he's in the hospital right now because his wife is 6.5 months pregnant. She's like, the baby is dying inside of her, and the doctors are saying, "Hey, like, we got to try and deliver this baby now, or you are going to die," his wife.
Yeah.
So I'm on the phone with him, and he's emotional and I'm talking to him and encouraging him and all that. And then as soon as I got off the phone, I called up my brother who was with my mom, and I was like, "Hey, you guys need to call him." My mom was like, "I'm gonna call him right now," right? And so and Ricardo grew up with my mom. We were in kindergarten together, so I know that my mom is going to be able to get him straight up here, right? Because my mom is just that. She's been through hell and back, and she always picked herself back up and never did.
What am I doing on this podcast with you? Why am I wasting time with you? I need to be talking to your mom. I need to get your mom on here for like a 4-hour stint.
Hey, my mom's on social media, man. She's a fitness guru on social. Yeah, look her up, Pauline Adeleke. She's 70 years old, and people think she's like 40 because she does fitness classes and she's a fitness trainer. She looks young, man. But
shout out to Mama Adeleke.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, so my mom, she really put in the work, and it wasn't easy because me not having a father, I was drawn to the streets, as you mentioned, and my mom, not only did she have to battle providing for us, but she also had to battle me doing the things and trying to live the lifestyle that I was trying to live, which was not nice. I started out stealing from my mom, and then that progressed to stealing from stores, that progressed to stealing from jobs, that progressed to selling drugs. I was in the drug game major. I was, buying drugs in Washington Heights, which is well-known area where people buy their drugs from. And then I would jump on a Metro North train, go up to Poughkeepsie, New York, where Ricardo moved to. The kid was just and we would sell drugs up in Poughkeepsie, New York. And then, I got into high-level scams where I was, making tons of money, stealing people's personal information, and activating phone lines and selling phones to drug dealers so that they could have to communicate with whoever they needed to for 90 days. And then the phones would cut off and they come back to me and I get another. So I was deep. And for me, it was all about making money because I wanted to get respect and I wanted power. And, we had a saying in New York City at the time: money, power, respect. First you get the money, then you get the power, then people will respect you.
I want to ask you a question. Forgive me, I want to interrupt and stop there for a second. Because you said what I was trying to make that money, but it sounds like, again, just not to wax philosophical about it too deep, but it was just like, I just wanted respect. I needed, there was something there was a gap in my self-worth or my self-esteem or my self-image or something. I wanted what other people had. It wasn't just the money or the hustle or maybe even the thrill of the hustle, but it was, and that's more of a question. Was it just ultimately trying to establish like who I am and I am somebody?
Yeah, well, I think it was in part that. I think it was also the lack of affirmation. I think, every child needs to get affirmed by their father. I truly believe that. And I think that that's the way we're all designed. Yes, there's mom's affirmation, but, I even see it in my kids, when I'm in my kid's football game or baseball game or basketball game, and I'm just saying, hey, good job, good catch. Even if they drop the ball, I'm like, hey, good try. Like they light up, like it gives them like superpowers, right? And to hug them at night and say, hey, I love you. And you're special and you're going to be great. And, and I'm so happy you're like those words consistently, that sets, in my opinion, that sets the tone for the rest of a kid's life.
Yeah.
Especially in my opinion for girls, because if they get that proper affirmation from their dad and their dad shows them how they should be loved by a man, they're not going to be 16, 17, 18, 20 running off with some dude that's going to treat them like crap.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're going to have had a standard, kind of like I had a standard from my mom, as to do whatever you do with excellence, never quit, keep pushing. Like I had that standard instilled in me. So it was part of my nature, became a part of my DNA. And I think it's the same way with a child. When you affirm them, it becomes a part of their DNA and it gives them confidence, in who they are. And it builds up their self-esteem. And I think for me as a kid, not having that, I was just unconsciously seeking that out. I was seeking to make money so that I can get that pat on my back by my friends, by girls, by people who didn't know me. Hey, you're the man. Oh yeah, look at your car. Look at those girls you're sleeping with, all that stuff. And, you see it a lot, even with rappers, and you see it with athletes, pro athletes, who grow up in single parent homes and they have that, they buy these, the statistics, it's like 70% of, I think it's like 70% of NBA players go broke and 60% of NFL players, something like that. There was a whole documentary called Broke, which breaks down how, and you watch this documentary, you see why they were spending money on these ridiculous cars they didn't need, these houses they didn't need. They were paying for their entourage, buying out the bar, making it rain in the club, just throwing money. And I get why they do that, because they're seeking affirmation. They may not realize it, but they're seeking that affirmation. And I did that. I was going to the club and spending money and buying bottles spending like rent money in one night, for what? Like for what? and so that's where I think it all came from. Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off, man. I'm glad I did, because it's a really fascinating topic when you start peeling back the layers of the onion about why with that kind of validation. I want to come back to that, but I cut you off. You were talking about rising up, and at some point, if I read an article, or I think it might have even been in the book in Transformed, you talked about a guy came in and threatened your life, and that was a seminal moment for you.
Yeah, it was a huge wake up call for me, because I sold him some products that went bad fast, and he was pissed off, and rightly so. And he wanted his money back, and my life was threatened. My mom's life was indirectly threatened, and that was a huge wake up call for me. And it also along the same lines, and at the same time, there were guys and women who were running the same type of phone scam that I was running. They were getting caught, prosecuted, and sent to federal prison. So here I am in this situation where, my life is threatened. I can end up dead, and people who are going to federal prison, or I can end up in federal prison. And that was
one way or another, this didn't end him good.
It doesn't end nice. Yeah, at all.
I interviewed another SEAL recently. We've had a bunch of them on the podcast, and one of the guys that I interviewed, and then I interviewed another this PhD who had done a bunch of studies. He'd worked for the Navy and studying about. He tried to increase the graduation rate from buds. He was hired by the Navy to do that, and he studied how the psychology behind SEALs, and there's the Navy's invested millions of dollars at this point since long before you and I came in, about trying to figure out what makes us tick. And the guy Rich Davini, retired SEAL Team 6 commander, just really very, very cognitive and very intelligent guy. But he said, and the reason it's relevant is I think you and I share a little bit of the same thing, even though we grew up in very different upbringings. He said SEALs historically score very high on an ACE, what's called an ACEs assessment. It is the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. I think it's survey. So ACES, Adverse Child Experience Survey. And he said, guys, so my dad died when I was just a kid, left my mom, who was also an immigrant to the United States, but left her with 3 boys who were 12, 9, and 7, unemployed, stay-at-home mom, and she had to, figure it out. And so again, very drastically different, but very similar circumstances. And I think what allowed me to be successful into the teams is just there was, and I've always used this term talking about some of the other guys, some of the other really hard charging guys I've met, is there was nothing that life was going to throw at me nothing that buds was going to throw at me that life hadn't already thrown at me at some point. And again, anybody who's honest with themselves will acknowledge that buds drove you to a breaking point. Now, and it's what you did as you hit that convergence point. Did you break, or did you find out a little bit deeper about what you're made of? And it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like if you were to take that Adverse Childhood Experience Survey, I mean, just based on, going from rich to poor, being raised and having a gun pointed at your head, all this kind of stuff, like at some point you finally get the buds. Is it fair to say you get the buds and you're what you want, or I should say, what you don't want to be?
100%. Yeah. It's like even when I got to boot camp, bro, I'll never forget, dude, when I finally got to boot camp, is a story in and of itself, because I had warrants out for my arrest, but and my recruiter hooked me up. But that first night when the kids they turned out the lights, they were like kids wailing. Like I remember, like it's just like all these kids crying, and I can't remember, like 100 kids in my division, something like that. All you hear is like this sniffling and crying, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? And I was just like, have these kids not lived? Like, have they had such a sheltered life that they can't go one night without being away from mommy and daddy? Like, it was just foreign to me, you know what I mean? And and so, getting to buds, was like, it sucked, you know what I mean? It's supposed to suck, but I was like, man, I'm getting 3 meals a day, hell week, 4 meals a day.
Yeah, right.
Dude, I'm getting called names. So what? I got called names. I got beat up growing up in the Bronx. Like I got beat up bad growing up in the Bronx. And yeah, we call it beatings, but it's like they're not physically beating me, but they're making me do push-ups and hit the surf and all that. Like, dude, like it wasn't, my whole life had prepared me for it. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, it's hard to explain. It was like I was conditioned for it mentally. Like we talk about physical conditioning a lot, and having to be able to swim and push-ups and pull-ups and all that stuff and endurance. But I had been mentally conditioned.
Yes.
Like my whole life.
Right. Truly, there was nothing Buds was going to throw at you that life hadn't already thrown at you in one form or another, right?
Exactly. And even now to this day, like, I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, life is still hard. Like life is not easy. You know what I mean? And working in Hollywood is like extremely hard. Like the attrition rate for people who go to Hollywood to try to make it and then end up don't making it is like it's higher than SEAL training.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's higher than SEAL training, because you get people from all around the world, not just America, who could move to Hollywood in order to make it, as a writer, director, or actor. And every single day is a grind. It's like Buds, you're not getting, shouted at, and sometimes you're not, depending on who you're dealing with, but it's like, it's mentally challenging. It's like, how long can you hold out? Like, how many times can you take rejection and keep on? I've been rejected so much in my life, but I've never been rejected as much in anywhere as I've been in Hollywood. You know what I mean? And so it's life conditioned me for being a frogman, and then being a frogman, further perfected my mental conditioning to prepare me for everything that I do now, not just in Hollywood, but in my other businesses, in my school, and the nonprofit work that I do. It's all very challenging. And then I have a family. So how do I manage all of that stuff?
I'd love to have you back on for a second conversation, just talking about, you spent 14 years in the teams. We didn't even scrape the surface on what you did in the teams. Also, your acting career, what you've done with SAS and all the other, I mean, just really, really cool stuff you have going on. If it's cool with you, man, I'd love you to have back on. We'll connect and figure out another place to get you back on. But where can folks find you on the interweb?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to make a quick correction. 13 years in the Navy, 8 of those years were in the teams. Just want to make sure, because I know never want somebody to say, "Oh, this is," you said 14. I always want to be upfront, because I hear stories of guys who inflate. Never want to be that guy. So as far as where you can find me, Remi Adeleke, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. My Facebook has been disbanded, so not for anything bad, just because I don't know. But anyway, my Facebook is Eighth Wonder Entertainment, but Remi Adeleke on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. My YouTube channel, where you can find the short film The Unexpected, is my YouTube channel is Remi Adeleke. If you have a hard time finding that, then you can just search Remi Adeleke The Unexpected Film, and it'll all pop up.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us, brother. Really appreciate your time, and looking forward to getting you back on and talking some more about how the military is conditioned for where you are today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, bro.
All right.